Afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Leo Xu. I'm the Executive Director at Silver Eye Center for Photography. Silver Eye's mission is to promote contemporary photography as a fine art form. We support emerging, underrepresented, underseen artists. We do this through our exhibition program, through our education programs, through our lab at Silver Eye. We've recently relocated our lab down the street to Penn and Atlantic, and it is expanding in very exciting ways. So I invite you to learn about that on our website. Our mission converges with Alma Lewis's in creating spaces that nurture underrepresented artists in their growth and creating conversations around art, sharing this work with the public, and thereby strengthening communities of artists and also strengthening communities through the arts. This evening's program is an apt example of photography's power not only to describe, but also to recognize, acknowledge, and affirm, and to be a way to bring people together. I'd like to acknowledge our many government and private funders, foundations, and crucially, our individual supporters. We do this work for you, and we wouldn't be able to do it without you. Again, we're very proud to have the opportunity to partner with Alma Lewis on today's program, and I'm honored to introduce Kilolo Luckett, founding director of Alma Lewis.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Leo, and thank you, Helen, for saying yes to this exciting program that Grace Roselli has brought to Pittsburgh, Pandora's Box Project. My name is Kilolo Luckett, and I am I'm the founding executive director and chief curator of Alma Lewis. For you that do not know anything about Alma Lewis, we are about, I'd say, almost 2 years old in our first brick and mortar space, which is in North Point Breeze and the X Factory, 6901 Lynn Way. It's been a labor of love for me. I have my background in history of art and architecture, and I've worked in various different museums throughout the city and different cultural institutions, and just always saw kind of this dearth of Black and brown faces in curatorial and educational positions. And so I wanted to do something that kind of address that need. And so over the past, I would say, decade, I'd been doing some pop-up events called By Any Means, working with different institutions to partner and shine a light on the Black and brown artists that are doing some extraordinary work, and also curators and art writers. And so with that, I started Alma Lewis. Alma Lewis is two names, two artists, Alma Thomas and Norman Lewis. I don't know if anybody knows of those artists. I won't say anything about them. I will encourage you to learn more about Alma Thomas and Norman Lewis, and also their ties to Pittsburgh. And so I have a 2,100 square foot space, which is a gallery and a residency, an artist residency that's 3 months long. And I also have a space dedicated to the Black Archive, which is a non-circulating space with books and ephemera dedicated to Black culture, history, and art. So I just wanted to give you a little synopsis of Alma Lewis, and you were wondering, like, why is Silver Eye partnering with a space called Alma Lewis? So just wanted to give you a little context to that. But also, Grace Roselli, how we got here. Grace Roselli is right here. She not only is a photographer, she is a painter by training. She's formally trained as a painter. She is one of the, and I think still the youngest artist to ever go to Skowhegan. And I think you are, apparently, to a lot of artists. So just to give you some context, that she's been around the art world for a long time, doing some just inspirational, transformative work and shining a light into not only, curators, artists, arts writers, but just people that are innovating throughout their career. And Pandora's Box Project is really shining like a beacon of light on those kind of marginalized cultural workers and artists that are really doing a lot of work but might not get the shine or the write-ups that they really deserve. And so when we were connected right before lockdown, I was in New York for work, and that's where you photographed me. And it's kind of like word of mouth. She wants people that are part of the project to really, give her recommendations. You do research on Pandora's Box project. And so when Grace reached out to me through a friend, I was like, okay, let's talk about this. Let's get to know each other before, you photograph me. And then from there, I said, hey, you got to come to Pittsburgh. And there's some really interesting people doing some wonderful work in Pittsburgh. And so Grace came here, and she was able to photograph some people that you'll see tonight. But also during the lockdown, you also did some virtual photography, which you photographed Fran, and you'll see, and we'll talk about that as well, as far as her practice of photographing people, both in her studio, in their home, in their studio, and also virtually. So I don't want to spoil any more about you, but I just want to share some accolades about you, Grace. Grace has received numerous awards and grants throughout her career, including the 2023 New York State Council on the Arts Award, the 2022 Money for Women Barbara Deming Memorial Fund Grant, and the 2022 Puffin Foundation Award. She was also nominated for the Anonymous Was a Woman grant and had her Pandora Box project accepted as a fiscally sponsored project by the New York Foundation for the Arts in 2022. I can go on and on about Grace, but we are going to get Grace up here to talk about her project, and then we'll have the panelists come up after she talks and gives you context about Pandora's Box project. So thank you. All right, Grace.
Okay. I want to say thank you, Kilolo, Alma Lewis, Helen, and Silvereye for partnering with me on this, and to the speakers for being here, Joanne, Fran, Kilolo, Diane, thank you for being on this journey with me. And a special thanks to Helen for moderating and Silvereye for hosting. And also let me mention that when I use the word woman, it's spelled W-O-M-X-N and is inclusive of trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and female individuals. Pandora's Box Project. My quietly radical visual manifesto for the ongoing revolution that celebrates women's creativity, power, and influence on the world, or how women doing what they do change the world through their voice and art. Pandora constructs a record challenging societal norms through its recognition of the pivotal role that contemporary and historical women creators and art workers have played in shaping cultural values and, by extension, our lives. Art has always been a powerful tool for social and political change, influencing our deepest held beliefs and giving expression to what it means to be human. Revolutionary feminism and civil rights movements took hold of American society 6 decades ago, inspiring many women to claim their rights, assert their voices, and create the art that redefined the world we now exist in. Because of those 60s and 70s social revolutions, women en masse brought a fresh voice, emotions, the agency of their body, the female gaze, to make an art. The radical and subversive newness of their vision was liberally borrowed and disseminated through the culture by their male counterparts and subsequent generations of younger artists. There's not always a clear line of influence. Eleanor Anton's postcard male art, Howardina Pindel's vid, Free White and 21, Carolee Schneeman pulling a scroll out of her vagina, Linda Good Bryant and Just Above Midtown, artist Linda Benglis, not getting enough attention for her radical sculptural forms, took out the now infamous ad of herself nude with a dildo in the middle of a 1974 Art Forum magazine. that went on to be featured in countless gender studies classes and influenced many younger artists, well-known art photographer Cindy Sherman among them. I'm paraphrasing from art critic Lucy Lepard's 1976 book, From the Center. It's no coincidence that the advent of a behaviorist autobiographical art coincided with the rise of the women's movement. Much women's art, forged in isolation, is deprived not only of historical context, but also of dialogue with other recent art. Basically, Lucy's saying that in 1976, the existing form of art discussion from primarily Caucasian men at that point was inadequate for the ideas that women were bringing to the table. I'm sorry. Well, women, I should memorize this thing too. I mean, I've only talked about it enough times. I'm just like nervous. Okay, while women have fundamentally reshaped how we experience art and culture since the 1960s, many of their historic and artistic achievements remain under-recognized or near invisible within the contemporary art canon, mainstream media, and more recent generations. A recent art market report, The State of the Market for Women Artists' Work by Kaplan Lesser, pretty much states that while better women's prices are still low compared to the guys, but in the ultra-contemporary art market with women 40 and under, it's even if not better, which is pretty much in dollars a direct line of what I'm saying here. Change comes from multiple sources, but the cultural shift regarding women in art comes from boots on the ground activism with, and probably mostly women artists that kept doing what they do. Year after year, the support system growing in their support, along with the younger generations having access to many more and very diverse role models, platforms to show, to discuss work, I mean, exponential growth in numbers. And then there's the rolling back of Roe v. Wade, and the struggle continues. Women featured in Pandora span across generations, ethnicities, physical locations, race, and art genres. Inclusivity is central to the project's message, and the photo sessions are designed to honor this diversity. The photo shoots are conducted with minimal pre-production, and I try to limit the way that I see my subjectivity by not bringing my own lighting to a location generally chosen by the subject. It's just me, subject, camera, we talk, we laugh, you know, take pictures. The one consistent thing I hear pre-photo shoot from almost everyone participating is, I hate having my picture taken, I don't look good in photos. Yeah, me too. It's a struggle to get away from, you know, whoever we set up in our head to judge. But seriously though, I'm so grateful for everyone that, you know, puts aside their vulnerability and like just does this. So I could have my project, and it's, you know, gonna be great. When I present my edit, after, you know, because I do edit everything, because I take a lot of pictures, the women choose the portrait that they want to exhibit to the public. This creates a dynamic and unique portrayal of trailblazers in our culture. Ultimately, I will have photographed 360 women. There's probably about 250 or 60 in this slideshow, so I'm getting close. They'll represent the infinite but concentric circles of beauty, humanity, knowledge, and innovation that is embodied by every artist and art worker that ripples and radiates out into society and on and on. I began Pandora to make friends, to make art friends. My painting practice had become isolating. My two daughters weren't little kids anymore, didn't need the same amount of mom time. I started riding motorcycles more. I made Naked Bike, a project with women bikers, asking what happens when you get off what should be a gender-neutral machine and walk into female. But I needed to be connected into a network of artists if I ever wanted an art career. So in an aha moment, thought I'll take pictures of women artists. The few that I still knew recommended other women, and the project grew organically. I included the female support system, dealers, curators, art critics, collectors, various art workers, because it takes a village to raise a baby. Maybe because I'm older, maybe because raising children took me out of my own head. I can listen better, maybe because I'd never really participated in the art world I wanted so badly to be in. I started to see a story I hadn't realized or even understood was there. 91-year-old artist Dorothy Rockburn said to me a few years back, "The point that always strikes me hard is that women settled for so little and are grateful for little. It took me years to understand the discrimination. I mean, the story was out there in bits and pieces, you know, the future's female, but yes, so was the past. But by actually witnessing and building this narrative face to face, I am presenting the hard evidence. How? Pandora's timeline is inseparable from the tumultuous circumstances of our contemporary world. Women featured in the project have lived and persevered through struggles for civil rights and liberties, the ongoing impact of sexism and racism, a global pandemic, and the rise of digital innovation, documenting and presenting the stories of women who we recognize for their place in contemporary culture is critical to understanding the world that we now live in. The project strives to bridge generational gaps, challenge traditional notions of gender identity, while increasing appreciation for diverse cultural histories within our communities and beyond. It serves as a tribute to the voices of those who came before us, leaving a lasting legacy of this cultural moment for future generations. My hope in having these talks is that they activate the portraits, enabling some of the stories, and there's some great stories, I mean, not everything could be repeated, of course, to be woven through each photo session to be shared with you all. Pandora's Box project takes its name from an ancient myth about a woman whose curiosity and impulse caused her to open a box that changed the world. Women have made and continue to make a lasting history of cultural change that is celebrated throughout this world. It has been and continues to be my tremendous honor meeting these spectacular, courageous, and creative women. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Leo, Kilolo, and Grace. And I'm delighted to introduce the rest of this evening's panelists. Joanne Bates is a prolific artist and arts educator from Pittsburgh. As a prize-winning printmaker, she has exhibited at the Pittsburgh Center for the Arts, Carnegie Museum of Art, and numerous regional and national galleries. Named the Pittsburgh Center for the Arts 2017 Artist of the Year, Bates continues to influence her community of artists and students in her work. She's had an extensive career as an arts educator. After 29 years with the Pittsburgh public school system, Bates devotes her time to her artwork, serving on various committees such as the Carnegie Institute Museum of Art Education Committee and Chairman Friends of Art for the Pittsburgh Public Schools. Fran Flaherty is a deaf artist, curator, and educator practicing in Pittsburgh and Rochester, New York. As a first-generation immigrant from the Philippines, her work is centered on issues surrounding migrant family relations and assimilation, maternal feminism, disability aesthetics, and social work. She is the founder of Anthropology of Motherhood, an ongoing curation of artwork and design that engages in the complex visual, material, emotional, corporeal, and lived experiences of motherhood, motherhood, caregiving, and maternal labor. She is also the director of the Dyer Art Center for the Advancement of Deaf Culture and serves on the board of the Office of Public Art in Pittsburgh and is a proud member of the Not White Collective. Kilolo Luckett is a Pittsburgh-based art historian and curator. With over 20 years of experience, she is committed to elevating the voices of underrepresented visual artists, specifically women and Black and brown artists. Luckett is founding executive director and chief curator of Alma, who I'm so glad we're partnering with, an experimental contemporary art platform for critical thinking, dialogue, and creative expression dedicated to Black culture. She served as the art commissioner for the City of Pittsburgh Art Commission for 12 years, and her extensive work with national and international artists has included at the August Wilson African American Cultural Center, Andy Warhol Museum, and Wood Street Galleries. Diane Samuels is a visual artist with studio and public art practices. In both, she uses other people's words as her literal and figurative raw material. And since 2010, she has made drawings that are hand transcriptions of entire books. And these books are based on the core mission of the City of Asylum, an organization she co-founded with her husband, Henry Rees. City of Asylum provides sanctuary to writers in exile who are persecuted for their literary writing. And the books Samuels chooses to transcribe deal with themes of exile, social justice, and encountering the other. Her work has been exhibited extensively internationally and is in public and private collections, including the Carnegie Museum of Art, Bank of New York Mellon, Reed College, Municipal Museum of Art, and the Ruth and Marvin Sackner Archive of Concrete and Visual Poetry. So I'm so honored to be in conversation with you all this evening, and I'm really excited to begin to explore your paths as artists, arts practitioners, and women during our time together tonight. So to begin with, I'd like to talk about some of your early influences as artists and arts practitioners. Who was instrumental to you when you were starting out in your art practice? What role models were available to you? And was there an anti-role model who was just important as you were beginning your careers? And how were those role models perhaps affected by society at the time? Yeah. And anyone can go first. I'm going to pick on someone soon. Joanne, would you like to lead us off? No.
No, I'm not prepared. My name is Joanne Bates. I'm a local Pittsburgh artist. I've been involved in art all of my life. I've been very fortunate that my parents encouraged me, even though they didn't have a big understanding about art, but they encouraged me to pursue the career in art. And I started from elementary, junior, and then high school, and then I went on to college. And my professor, Dr. Taylor, was really instrumental in putting me on the road to understanding art and what it is for me. From there, I started working really, really difficult with the art, and didn't start getting involved in printmaking for a number of years. But as a college student, I pursued all kinds of art. Whatever they told you to do, that's what I did. But my main role models were Della, as I said before, Thaddeus Mosley, who's a local artist here, Sam Gilliam, who is now deceased, lived in Washington. Who else? I'm trying to think. And a local artist here. Jerry Kaplan, Robert Qualters. These were all what I would call friends of mine, and who had some influence on me in terms of what I was attempting to do. And they were also very, very encouraging. So that's what I did. And I actually had, my children were somewhat responsible for encouraging me. While I was teaching, I had the experience of working with a number of kids. I worked at the Creative and Performing Arts High School. And having experience with these kids who were very talented kids, but had no idea that they were as talented as they were. They tried everything. And I had gained a lot from their experience because they were free, they were young, 9th graders, and they didn't really begin to blossom until about the 11th grade. But we journeyed this road together through Kappa, because Kappa was a new founding school at that time. I started the school along with 4 other educators, and we built the school from about 20 students to what it currently is today, which is located in downtown Pittsburgh. But at one point it was located in the Homewood-Bruston area. People didn't think that this program would even work, because this was, I would say, a feel-good program. They started the program to keep things quiet, but it caught on and it just blossomed. So we had students coming from all over the city for the program, and it was just a great success. I don't know what else.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And I love that your students were influencing you just as much as you were teaching them. Thank you for sharing that. Would anyone like to share some reflections around role models or anti-role models?
Anti-role models are just as important.
Yes, you are. You are on the panel, Grace.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I was thinking about the difference between a role model and a mentor, and that I've had a lot of mentors in my life, and mentors are people who really cared about me and my artwork. But I've had a couple of role models who, when you asked this question when we discussed this panel, I've had role models who really didn't know me or care about me, but were really essential in my life. One of them is someone who some of you may know in Pittsburgh, a man named Chuck Barr, who I met when I was in, did you know him, Beth? When I was in college, and he lived on Craig Street. He was a sax player, and he painted. And I'd go over there with friends, and he lived in a very modest place. And he would play the sax, and he painted all the time. And every time I went there, I was just struck by how much he did and how much he loved painting. And that he wasn't trying to, maybe he was, but it didn't seem to me to be a famous painter. He just loved painting. So having the role model of someone who just was completely devoted to music and art, that was really, really important to me. And then when I was a kid, I lived on Long Island in a kind of rural place. And there was probably when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, I was wandering around by myself, which people don't do anymore with their kids, I guess. But I came across this house that had a big sort of sunroom, and there was a woman in there who was painting, and she had all these little paintings hanging on the wall. And she saw me outside and invited me in. Again, this is not something that people would do now. And I went in, and she painted these landscapes. And like Chuck, she was really devoted to what she did and loved doing it. So I guess as far as role models, the idea of finding something that you really love and to be able to pursue it is something that I feel really lucky to have been able to do. As far as influences, I started out in college as a textile artist. I started out as a weaver, which everybody made a joke about. But I loved having all these little threads, these little tiny lines, and assembling them into something. So taking, whether it's quilt making or weaving, taking a lot of little parts and putting them together into something big was really important to me. And I started with more traditional weaving, and then I read the Lucy Lepard book on Eva Hess, and I was just blown away by someone who was using the same materials that I was, but using them in a really what I considered radical way.
Was it 70? Was it 70?
No,
No,
this was probably 60s. When did the book come out?
67.
Yeah, so I was probably, because I started college in 66. So yeah, and so I just was knocked out by the idea of the materials that I was using going in a different direction. And there were a lot of textile artists who I looked at that time, like Magdalena Bakanovich from Poland, Barbara Chase Reball, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing, Olga Amaral, who were doing these really large, fabulous things that were floppy and big and not bound to the wall, but just made up of all these tiny little lines. So,
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Kilolo, Fran, would you like to share?
What a bunch of timid women you have, Grace. Everybody's shy, don't want to talk. I'm a little shy because my art career kind of started with art lessons, painting lessons with this national artist from the Philippines. His name was Roady Herrera. And I had lessons from him from the time I was 12 till I was 16. I can't say that he's an influence in me because I blew off class half the time to meet with my boyfriend at that time. But that was my introduction to art. And, you know, this was in the 80s, right? Early 80s. So, and art in the Philippines in context is different from art here in the US that was happening at that time. We were very much still into classic work, traditional work, you know, realism, impressionism, you know, all of these very comfortable isms. So it was just really building up my painting skills. And so I was a confused artist for a very long time. Like, I didn't know what art really was, why I really wanted to do it, and why it was so important to me. But I went and got my degree in studio arts and history of art and architecture. I went to Carnegie Mellon School of Art. I got a job there. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just there talking like, I know, right? It just seemed like I knew what I was doing. Like right now, it seems like I know what I'm doing. And then, my greatest influence in my art career is Joyce Kozlov. Yes, Joyce Kozlov. What's that? She's phenomenal.
She knows. I mean, so many women she has touched. Oh, sorry. She's touched so many women. If none of you know Joyce Kozlov, she's coming out of the pattern and decoration movement. She's also in my project. And I noticed that she was doing a collaboration with Fran, and that's how I reached out to Fran. But yeah, no, Joyce, in terms of like feminist, the feminist movement, she wasn't part of AIR. But anyway, I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, it's fine. Yeah, she is just she came to visit Carnegie Mellon once. She came up to me and said, "Hey, you want to work together?" You don't say no to Joyce Kozlov, right? So I'm like, sure. And that was kind of the journey, and it was both because I was introducing her to this new medium and she was introducing me to her work. And it was really a very symbiotic relationship. But the thing that really got me, that the way she mentored me, which I don't experience with a lot of people, was she asked me questions and asked for my opinion all the time. What do you want to eat? How does the art look? You know, I mean, it's all the time. She kept asking me, what do you think of this, Fran? What do you think of that? And it's really transformative when someone asks your opinion like that and is genuinely interested in what you have to say, because you start thinking to yourself, well, I better really say something good, or I need to know what I'm saying. So it really forced me to look into my own art practice, my visions of what I wanted my practice to be. And I knew there and then that I wanted my practice to have an element of motherhood in it, an element of deafness in it, and an element of being an expat. Some people say immigrant. We'll say expat for now. But Joyce really helped me recognize my work and say, yes, what you're doing is art, and you should continue doing it, and don't stop. And coming from a Filipino-Chinese family, you don't become an artist, right? My grandmother, bless her heart, who I was just telling Karen over there, we have similar experiences with my Chinese grandmother. I wanted to take philosophy in college, and she laughed at my face and laughed and laughed. And she said, Alma says, she said, why you want to take philosophy? I'm going to read book. I'm going to know philosophy. And that was she laughed for an hour at my face. Like an hour. And what do you do? What do you do as a grandchild? But she was my, my feminist icon at that time. And she was like, don't go to art. Like, okay. And so I ended up meeting Joyce, and Joyce became my Jewish art mom, basically. And she welcomed me into her home. She welcomed me into her family. And she just really made me feel valuable as a human being, as a woman, and as an artist. So my relationship with Joyce is really transformative. I haven't said this to her though. I haven't actually told her. Oh, she knows. She knows.
It's like my kids, or it's like saying I love you to them, they're like, Mom, you never say I love you. I'm like, but they're like,
I know we have to get to that point. We're all sort of busy, right? Every time I'm there, we're working. And Joyce is like the only artist that I know that will keep up with me and working in the studio. We worked for 20 hours straight in the studio one time, just because I think we were like competing with each other. Like, we
Well, I hope you can tell her one day in person what she means to you.
Oh, maybe is this on video?
Yeah.
We can just send a video.
Can you share about? I just saw her actually last week. We had coffee. Because I like talking to her.
Sorry.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
Helena, would you like to share about role models that have influenced you or anti-role models?
Yeah, I know Grace is pressing on the anti-role model.
I'm not pressing on it, just,
I mean, I can relate to some of what you're saying, Fran, about you didn't know until you were later in life. I didn't know what a curator was until I came to college. But my mother reminded me that when I lived in Ohio, when we did lemonade stands, I would go, they were a quarter back in the 70s, okay, dating myself. And I would get some of my friends' artwork that they would give me, and I would take it to the lemonade stand and I'd sell it for 50 cents, knowing that people would give me $1 and say, keep the change. So then I would split it with my friends. So my mother reminded me that I did that. And my mother didn't know what a curator was, but she says earlier on, when you were like 5 years old, that's what you were doing. And she told me I was taking literally lemons and making lemonade. And so I was like, wow, okay. But I babysat a lot when I was in high school. And that was a way to make money. And I babysat a woman who was an artist. Her name is Mary Claire Evans. I still keep in touch with her. And she would take me to her openings and get me to make sure people sign the guest book. And she'd show me how to hang artwork and write labels. And to this day, that always stuck in my mind, but I didn't go to school first for art history. I had a different track. I thought I wanted to be a doctor because my parents were first generation to go to college and they wanted a doctor, attorney, engineer, that kind of practical career, right? And when I said I'm changing my major, my dad was like, what are you doing? You're going to be impoverished. And didn't I teach you better? And I'm like, I'm happy. And so fast forward, I am a curator and I love what I do. And I really wanted to, just really pull from the people that have really supported me in getting me to this point, because it really did take a village to raise Kilolo Luckett, and it still continues to be a village, because I want to thank my ancestors, those ones who, I'm from Mississippi originally. And so I come from a legacy of people working with their hands and people that were fiber artists, people that made sculptures out of found material and put it in their yard. And so it might not have been a linear way of getting here, but I am here. And that's just what I'm really thankful for. And I just look around at this panel and I think about all the people that are up here that have really helped me in creating the world that I want to really thrive in. And I do want to speak to a role model. I remember my mother collecting magazines, mainstream magazines. So Life, because we grew up reading Ebony and Jet magazine, but Life magazine. And I remember her having this cover of Naomi Sims. And it was 1969, excuse me. And I was just like, who is this dark-skinned Black woman? And my mother was like, she's from Oxford, Mississippi. I still remember this. And I didn't know that I was going to seek out this person later in life who happened to move to Pittsburgh and went to Westinghouse, moved to New York City in the 60s, and became this, before they knew what supermodel was. She landed on the cover of the New York Times Fashions of the Time in 1968. And she went on to land all these other covers and paving the road for Beverly Johnson to be on the cover of Vogue, right? But also she became friends with a lot of artists. Ray Johnson, Warhol, Andy Warhol, 1972 on the cover of Interview magazine. The first time Andy Warhol was on his own cover. If you look at it, he's never been on the cover while he was alive. It was after his death. So that just sparked something in me when I moved here. And I thought, oh, well, there's never been anything really written about her, like literally an essay. There's her obituary, you know, and I just like, I want to write an essay about her. Let me interview some people. So I always do my sphere of influence, not the people I know, but the people that she knew who are still alive. And so I started with her ex-husband, Michael Finley, Leon Talley, Beverly Johnson, and I just cold called these people. I kid you not. I called Michael Finley, who's the director of Aquavella Galleries, on a Friday afternoon. It's the worst time to call a gallery. And I had written down my spiel about why I was writing this article about his former wife, who had been, who is deceased, by the way, and because she passed away to cancer. And I got to the front desk, and then I told them I acted like, I was this very confident person. I'm writing this essay on Naomi Sims. They're like, does he know you? Does Michael Finley know you? I was like, no, but I'm writing this article. I'm an art historian. They're like, okay, hold. Kicks up to his administrative assistant. I give them the same spiel, and they're like, hold. And I thought they were going to put me in his voicemail. Lo and behold, Michael Finley answered the phone. And the first thing he says to me is, nobody ever asked me about Naomi. And this is years, decades after they've been married, divorced. He has another family, but they have a child together who's only a couple years younger than me. And so he actually invited me to come talk to him. And don't you know, within 2 weeks, I was on a plane to New York City to talk to Michael Finley. And he's somebody that I never thought was going to enter into my sphere, my network or whatever. And to this day, this man has been not only generous with his time about talking about his former wife, but also just other people in the art world. His connections to Warhol, his connections to Ray Johnson, his connections to other people, and being a Black woman in the arts, of like how I'm going to use that as an asset. I don't see it as a detriment. And so that's just something that has always stuck with me, of the generosity of people, like strangers. And my mother always said to me, just remember that homeless person could be writing you a check tomorrow. So basically, don't judge a book by its cover.
Such important reflections. Thank you. You mentioned something a minute ago about sort of non-linear pathways, either as artists or arts practitioners, and I just want to build on that a tiny bit. Can you each reflect a bit about what's been surprising or transforming within your own art journey, whether that's different models of working or the community that you carved out for yourself very organically, perhaps? Diane, it looks like you might.
Well, I was just thinking about, you said nonlinear. So my whole life I've been a reader, and I made art, and I was always really interested in mathematics. And it's only recently that I realized that I could pull together the reading and my artwork. And I've always used math in my work for figuring things out, but and then City of Asylum. And so all of these things, it's taken me a really long time, but all of these different tracks. And when I'd read during the day, I always felt guilty because I felt like I should be in the studio or I should be at a job that I had or doing something else. And now I feel like I can indulge in all of these things that I love and pull it together. So yeah.
I love that sense of gathering strands. Yeah. Would anyone else like to reflect on that question?
I know, here we are, women up here, and we're like shy to talk. We weren't like this when we did the Zoom pre-planning meeting, really.
Joanne, Fran, or Kilolo, would you like to reflect on the idea of, something you found transforming or surprising about your art journey, whether that's non-linear pathways or models of working that surprised you, or the communities that you found for yourself?
Yeah. Wow, that's hard to answer because I feel like every encounter that I have somehow touches my practice. Going to your house one day, and I'm gonna start like boom, boom, boom. I went to your house one day and we had little drinks like with you and Henry and Joyce, and we sat down. We had a very incredible conversation in your house, and it was just, it just kept feeding my mind and my heart and my soul. Joanne, your work with Women in Vision, I did a presentation for you guys, and your work at the PCA. I mean, it's just all of this. Just see, it's Kilolo, you brought in Tundi Way, and we had this incredible interaction in your studio, the office, your office, right? Was that
Image Box.
Yes, it was Image
Box up the street.
Right. So all of these little things that encounter the community that open up their doors to me really influence me. And I bring all of that into my practice. But of course, if we're going to talk about something that really allowed me to feel free with making my work, of course, Not White Collective, the group of 13 women who are not white. We come together and we make artwork. We make artwork about liberation, history, colonization, all of these things. And I am not doing justice to our mission statement, obviously. But those women have really provided me with an opportunity to be myself, to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to be in a safe space that if I say something that's not cool, they'll tell me. And I feel the same way towards them. So it is really, kind of like the way you're building Pandora is this community of women that really trust each other, which I'm sure, you've experienced that with Women of Vision too. And all of these amazing communities that we've built here. I mean, in Pittsburgh alone, we have all of these collectives that artists just come together and build relationships and build communities and build practices. So yeah, that's a great thing about being in Pittsburgh.
I think that's so powerful about building the communities that you need and that you want to see represented. And you're right, there's so many wonderful examples of that in Pittsburgh through the Not White Collective, through Jaded, through Women of Visions, as well as the kind of communities that are formed by small nonprofits like Alma Lewis, City of Asylum. It's a characteristic of the arts community here that I'm really proud to be able to see every day. So I'm just going to ask one last question because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions and from the audience. I'd just like you to reflect on what it means to be in the Pandora's box specifically. I know when we had our initial conversation, Diane, you made this lovely metaphor as the Pandora's box being like a quilt of these kind of organic, sort of very handcrafted connections. And I just wondered if either of you had any final reflections on what it means to be in the Pandora's box before we open it up to the audience.
Well, I had all of the women that when I talked to Grace, we're talking about the women who had been a part of this, I was amazed. You know, I don't even know how they found me, number one. I said, these women are far beyond what I was. It's a story. When I met her, I was at a gallery. I'm sitting on a sofa leafing through a magazine. And she said, do you mind if I take your picture? Sure. I don't care. I said, I've nothing to look at, but hey, I don't care. And that's how it started with me. But through my students and through traveling through the Hill District, through workshops, through beauty shots, to hear the conversations of women, particularly these were African American hairdressers or beauty shops, whatever you want to call them. But the conversations that would take place in these places was amazing. And as my work changed and I started using text in my work, a lot of this conversation would come from the text of these beauty shop situations and certainly from my students. My students had a wild way of talking. And so a lot of that, what I could use, I would use in my work.
Thank you. Would anyone like to share about what it means to be part of the Pandora's Box project?
I feel like it kind of affirms the work that I'm doing and just gives me more agency to, once again, create the world that I want to thrive in. And I think I'm always in awe. I'm very inspired by you, Grace, because when you learn about an art, you're so receptive when people give you recommendations and you do your own research, but you don't let whether the person has an agent like a gallerist or that person lives in another country like Barbara Chase-Riebold, who spends a lot of her time in France, you track them down. And, well, they have to say yes, but however, you do reach out to them. You figure out a way to get to them. And then you have this kind of conversation in various different forms too. That is really inspiring because you might be shy in certain aspects of reaching out to strangers, but you really connect and you really let them know that you really care about what they're doing and that you see them. And so that's really important, especially in this day and age where.
That's very true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the way in which you engage and then the way you show up in the studio, because when you were photographing Diane and I was able to come along and it was beautiful to watch you work and watch you. I was like a fly on the wall and the two of you connect and create your own world and your own, I say, magic. And you spent a good amount of time with Diane, and that's really important. You just didn't show up with your camera and take pictures. The same thing with Fran when you shared with me how you, through COVID and virtually through the computer, all the different screens and lenses that kind of separate us, you were still able to connect with Fran. And the same thing with Sarika. And Carrie Aramoto Mercer, you were able to go to her home. And it's a private space to go into somebody's home. But to feel at home in somebody else's home and connect, I think takes a lot of specificity and special connection, and you created that through making me feel at home in your studio in Brooklyn. So thank you.
But that curiosity and desire to make true, authentic connection with somebody is such an important part of trust and the creative process, especially around portraiture. So it's been really wonderful to hear you sort of reflect on that genuine curiosity and trust that you built through that collaborative portraiture practice. But I'd love to throw it open to all of you. I'm so glad have joined us this evening. If any of you have any questions you'd like to ask the panelists, I'd love for us to just spend the last sort of 15 minutes just having an open conversation together. Diane, sorry, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, just thinking about what Fran was saying earlier, and the threads of connecting people, and that it was because of Kilolo that you contacted me, and then I know the other women, and so feeling a bond that way, and so I'm on this textile metaphor of threads and quilts and all of that, and also seeing who you photographed before you came to my studio. I thought, wow, why me? And so I was really honored to be part of this. And then also, portraiture. When I'm photographed, it's either for scale in my work, so you can tell how big the work is, or it's some kind of family thing where I'm standing in a group and we're having our pictures snapped, and so I'm not used to being the subject myself. The subject is the family gathering or the artwork, and so it was a little daunting when you started, and then Grace and Kilolo, it was a really lovely. You were with me for hours, and it may have been because, but it also may have been because it was so hard for me to relax and be the subject and to have something that's just on me, and so it was a really lovely time. And then Grace took pictures of the two of us together, which I love those pictures also. So.
Thank you so much.
About like you guys were
and then both just so we have enough chance for question and answers, but please say
just you guys in my post-editing process. This is why I kind of I like the question, what's it like, being in it, because they're all close-up pictures, and not one of you said, oh, could you take away the wrinkles, could you do this, could you do that? All right. I have got so many responses about basically being a female in this culture that I was surprised, because I was like, we're artists, I thought, God, is everyone like me, really insecure, anyway, it was just an interesting, it's kind of a sociological study going through all the responses that I get to the pictures that I think might be, this is gorgeous. Oh, this person's going to love this. And I might have totally chose wrong. Because it's also, I'm trying to reinterpret what I saw when I was shooting to give back, and that's, sometimes I just don't interpret that person right. They're like, oh my God, I look so, or I'm, oh, this isn't me. This, do you have more? After I've spent hours. Anyway,
Oh, no, thank you, Grace. But I'd love to throw it open to the audience if you have questions. Sandra, I can see you have a question.
Continue that conversation. So do you go back and then you edit again and then you give back?
Sometimes.
So this was just a question about whether Grace edits again and again in terms of reviewing her work.
When do you say stop? When it's
it's okay. If someone I do not use a picture that someone does not want me to use. And if I have the time, I'll do a reshoot, usually once. If I don't like the picture, I beg to do a reshoot. Every now and then, I just don't get anything that I like that says anything. It really depends. I have one person that I thought she was going to love her recently, And she's like, "Oh, I hate these black and white." There wasn't even a thank you for the ones I took of her and her husband. I mean, I was like, come on. No, I mean, not that I'm looking, but I was like, shit. It was a little disappointing. But I'll go back because I really like this woman. And I'm like, okay, so, I'm not sure what she sees that I didn't see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know it gets interesting when your face changes and your hair changes and everything kind of changes, but you're remembering something else, or maybe it's not that at all. I took a picture recently of a woman, and I thought they got her. And I just threw another one in that I was like, I wasn't sure if the picture was demeaning because of her position on a couch. But she was laughing hysterically and it was cute, and I'm like, she could always say, never use this picture. So I threw it in there. And she's like, this is me. Do you have any more like this? So I never know. We're all varied individuals. So.
It's a good example of how our own perceptions of us are often very different to how others see us, and how we wrestle with that as individuals is a lifelong thing, I think.
Can I say something that, Grace, you really bring out who we are in the photos. Let me just say that, because, we always have this persona that we're out there. And when you get on the camera, that's one thing that I appreciated about it. You were like, do this and do that. And I'm like, but and you're like, just do it. I'm like, but yeah, it's part of who I am, and is that vulnerability. You make us vulnerable. And that is really hard to be a woman, a brown woman, a deaf brown woman. And it's hard for me to be vulnerable every day, every minute, right? Because you're always like going uphill. But when you say to somebody, be vulnerable, it's okay to be who you are, and the burden comes off, and it made me feel really seen. So as an individual, so I just have to thank you for that. And I know we want to do questions. So.
Oh no, thank you so much for sharing that, Fran. I think we had another question.
So forgive me because I feel like I'm missing something. So this wonderful sounding project is Pandora's Box project. You're taking all these photographs of all these female, big category box, artists. What are you going to do with these photographs?
Wrap it up, tie it a bow. It's going to be an archive. I want it to be a book in some form. I would love the book
to be stacks of paper on a floor and maybe somehow have the whole project printed on it with like an essay on the back, and people walk away with it. I want something maybe in a library, because at some point seeing all this snapshot of this time, I mean, I started this in late 2018, and pretty much what we've gone through in just these 5 years almost echoes the revolutions, the seismic sea change that happened in the 60s and 70s. So it's almost like you have this arc and then you have this arc. And these women here are still alive here. And a number of them, if they've been fortunate enough to stay alive, have seen their careers really take off, So yeah, that's what it's going to be. It's ultimately, it's an artwork, an archive, a collection. It'll be an exhibition of some sort, just because I feel it needs to be some kind of exhibition to put a period on it, and then I'll move on and do more artwork of something else. This is a project that is incredibly rewarding and life-changing for me. So.
But they're from the you get to see that on a TV screen. The photographs are stunning, and so it's really interesting to look at it. And the question that I hear just even from listening to this really wonderful group of women is to say, "Oh, I'm looking at this photograph. What do I know about this woman?" And so I'm really curious, as if part of the project is, if I'm looking at this, I'm looking at this woman, do I get to know who this woman was or is? If you do the work. Every single woman in that project is easily findable online. Mm-hmm. There takes, just like when you're looking at any artwork, there takes a certain amount of work by the viewer, Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm not giving everybody everything. It's like, I got the pictures there. It's a project about basically how this story is, women's voices changed the world over the past 60 years. So this is kind of showing the faces just of everybody. Some women are very well known. Some women aren't. Some have become well known in the past 5 years. Some, a few people have died. I mean, but every single person now that there is a way to look people up online has got something, and I give enough information. I'm recording the faces. It's not my job to put everything on there. If you're curious, you read more. But yeah, thank you for your questions. It's all very, very valid. I'm so happy with you.
I think one of the reasons that I was so drawn to your project initially was that you've built up an entire archive that really fills such a gap from the kind of stories and life stories of women that are mainly underrepresented in major institutions, and this sense that you've recognized this gap and filled it through such an incredible, far-reaching project is really inspirational. Yeah.
I mean, it's not just, the curatorial darlings, it's everybody. So, and the support system, especially, because you don't exist in a closet. It takes this person working for you, that person working, network, that's right.
And all of your reflections have spoken about that community that we have to create, because those systems of support through institutions are sometimes very lacking. Are there any other questions? Sue, I see you have a question.
For all of you wonderful artists and curators out there, if there are women who you are mentoring now, I know, Joanne, that you taught for so many years, and so you were mentoring the whole time you were teaching, but in your art practice, do you mentor?
I don't know that I mentor anymore. I'm still in touch with students, and they tell me what they're doing. This is not mentoring, but I work with one of the City of Asylum writers on a project, but it's not. I'm not leading it. We're partnering on it.
I don't think you have to have a specific definition of it. I'm just thinking that you have there's an incredible community that we have all as artists depended on, and are you passing it on to the next generation?
I think that depends on whether someone comes to you and asks for assistance. Then you may volunteer, you may give them some information, but I don't think it's going to come from us directly. At least that's my theory.
I always think about leaving the door open. It's really important. I mentor people. There's people I collaborate that I mentor, and they mentor me. It's reciprocal. I don't see it as a hierarchy. There's times when people might mentor me for a week, or it could be a year, it could be a lifelong thing. So absolutely, I believe in that. I believe in giving back and paying it forward. And as Thad Mosley says, keep the light on.
I agree with Kilolo. I think being in a university setting, I kind of am thrown into the mentoring program. We have students come in and we have that kind of relationship. But in terms of mentoring artist to artist, I feel the same way Kilolo does. It's more of a collaboration. In Anthropology of Motherhood, we've shown over 100 artist mothers, our caregivers in our website and our show. Sandra is one of them, and it becomes a collaboration. If we travel the show, we start talking to all of our artists. We talk about stipends and what we want to see in the show. So it's more of it becomes a community. So yeah, mentoring it's only for the students. but yeah, collaboration, I think, is the better word for it.
I agree. Collaboration is the key. Talking to, with, and for is more so important than just saying mentoring.
Yeah, I agree too. This sense of mutual mentoring and non-hierarchical mentoring. You know, for the second year, I'm a mentor on a curatorial training program called Prospectus, and I learn just as much from the mentees that I'm mentoring as they do from me. It's a very rewarding dual sharing of experiences. So.
Yeah, I agree. I have young people in my life who come to the studio and hang out or do things, and just the conversations with them and seeing what they're working on is really interesting for me. So yeah, I don't think of it as mentoring. I think, oh, it's great. I have these young people in my life. And it makes me happy.
So we probably have time for one more question before we can just chat informally together afterwards and have some refreshments if there's a final question that anyone would like to share.
I actually have a question.
Great, Jill.
I just wanted to say thank you all so much for all of your insights and wisdom. And as a young emerging artist, I like to say I occupy 3 different spaces. I'm Black, I'm a woman, and I'm a Black woman. And with that comes a certain vulnerability in which you're creating work, and also, you know, whether it's seen or not, or you choose to display it. So I guess my question is, you know, how do you take not only the identities that you all have, but how do you also combine them with your life experiences to create when life is tough? Like, it's great to make when everyone's feeling good and everything's going great, but how do you stay consistent, and how do you find the passion for your own projects and your own craft when, you know, maybe you're not feeling great, or, you know, something's wrong with the kids, or like anything that just happened in life?
Do you have children?
I do not. I like to say, I'm only 26, so I myself still feel like a baby.
When you have children, you will learn very quickly if you ever do. No, I mean, I think sometimes about the enormous amount of time that I spent doing, you know, I mean, when you're not feeling good, you still make work. When you just make work. And I think as you get older and you watch your time start getting lesser, and that's what you want to do. Because I mean, for me, it's like breathing. It's like drinking water. It's like, it's something I'm compelled to. It's almost like an addiction. It's like, I'm going to do it no matter what, you know, whether it's coming from a happy place or a bad place. And, you know, the kids, you work, I mean, you know, you work around your obstacles. I mean, they're a treasure, you know, but they're an obstacle. So.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit like brushing my teeth. I do it every day. And there are a lot of days where I don't feel like doing it, but I make myself do it. I make a lot of really bad things. I often spend 6 or 8 months making horrible things to get to where I need to go, but I can't do it in my head. So I just make it, and I've done this for so many years now that I'm miserable when I'm making the bad things, but I know I have to do it. And I go to bed at night and I think, oh, I've got it solved. I know what I'm going to do tomorrow morning, and then it's terrible. Right. Yeah, yeah. And so I just, but it's like calisthenics or brushing your teeth or making breakfast, and it's just get a rhythm. And even if you're feeling miserable and you do it 15 minutes a day, I mean, I've had these things where when I went into my studio, every day I would make a drawing, and sometimes it would take me 10 minutes, and then I'd think, okay, I did something today, and then I try to do something else. But if I couldn't, if I was in kind of terrible shape, I think, okay, I did something.
Joan keeps passing the mic this way. Boy, that's a hard question. But I agree with Diane and Grace. You just got to keep doing it. I think as artists, we have a special role in society, in that we really need to express our truths, whatever that is. Every day we experience ourselves, our truth. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes our truth sucks. And as artists, you keep doing it, even if it sucks that one day. And you're going to make bad art. And you might be one of the lucky ones who only makes, 90% bad art, as opposed to the unlucky ones who make 99% bad art. But you got to keep doing it, and you got to find space. You have to make space for yourself, for your creativity. And even if it hurts, even if it's bad, because it's, it's sad to say, it's really easy to get a hold of yourself, of your truth, when things are not good, right? Because you can be emotional, you can be in touch with yourself, you can be expressive. But it's important to see that all of you has to be manifested in your art, however that is. Are you a photographer or? So show your truth in your work, or whatever that is. And if you don't know it yet, own that and be like, yo, I don't know what my truth is right now. I'm just making this up, but that's fine, because you will know eventually.
There's also the part of recognition. And Chuck Barr is still my model, where the Museum of Modern Art wasn't banging on his door, but he was doing it because he loved it. And so can you keep making it if no one's paying attention? Yeah.
Thank you, Jill. Well, I think that's a wonderful thing to end on, how we find hope and sustenance to keep going even when it's hard. So thank you for all sharing about the hard parts of having an artistic, creative life, as well as the good parts. But please join me in thanking tonight's amazing panel, Grace, Diane, Kilolo, Joanne, and Fran. And I hope we can spend some time just chatting informally together with a refreshment afterwards. But thank you all for your contributions.
And thank you, Helen, for moderating, for facilitating. Thank you so much.
Kilolo, thank you.